She's Corinne Wrend technology. Okay, hopefully I'm coming out live. I'm going to give this a go. Let's see what happens. Oh, hang on a second. I'm doing a Corinne on this and making out like I don't know how to use technology. Let's see. Okay, so let's just give it a second to make sure that the good old Tinternet is working. Oh yes, it seems to be. Okay, excellent. So welcome. Hopefully people will join us. This was a spontaneous conversation that I cajoled, convinced, and bribed the other people that you see on the screen. I'll let them all introduce themselves to have a conversation about using reinforcement-based dog training in specifically sports that have a bite work phase. So for those of you that don't know what that is, that's where the dog has to essentially grab an arm or sleeve attached to an arm, hopefully, and detain a criminal or faux criminal in the context of a sport and a game. One of the people that are here with me this evening actually has a background also in law enforcement and being on the in real life situations with dogs. So that would be a really interesting to hear, conversation to hear. So hopefully people are joining. If you are joining, just put a comment to let me know that you can hear me okay, because I'm always dubious about whether I'm coming out before we start diving into the nuts and bolts of it. So it was, as I said, a bit spontaneous. So hopefully we'll have, oh, hang on a second. People join. Oh yeah, it should be. I can hear myself. Excellent. Okie dokie. So I'm going to go around, just introduce everybody to that is on the screen, so that you know who they are and a little bit briefly about their background. So we'll start with the grand dame of reinforcement-based bite work. That would be the one and only Corinne Wrend. Corinne, do you want to let us know who you are? Call her who you are and where you're calling from.
Okay, I'm Corinne. I'm calling from Shropshire. Yeah, I've been doing dog training for donkey's years. I mean, like 40 plus years. Started off doing obedience, did a little bit of working trials, and then got my first Malinois and saw other people doing other things and decided other sports were more suited to her. And that's when I started doing IGP. So, yeah, reinforcement based. Try and be, I don't know what the term is. I don't think anyone knows what the term is, but positive. As positive as I can be. Yeah. Yes, and that's like an emotional side, that I want my dog feeling good, not stressing, not worrying about what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And Corinne's not very good at blowing her own trumpet. Just to say, Corinne has competed at the FMBB, which is the World Championships for Belgian Shepherds, with her dog Chaska. And represented GB. So again, the conversation really evolved from people that are in the trenches doing it and actually hopefully, and obviously as you can hear from these people, they're succeeding. So next person, Alison, do you want to just let us know who you are?
Yes, I just want to add to what to Corinne again, rubbish at blowing her own trumpet, is that she has trained Malinois to IGP 3 and took Chaska to the FMBs 2-3 times, Corinne?
Twice. She's qualified twice as well for the FCIs.
But that's just, yeah.
How many IGP? Sorry, Alison. How many? You had Chaska, Quilla, Tesh. 3 Mallies. Okay, sorry. Go on, Alison.
Yeah. So my initial background was obedience with my pet dogs. Then I was in the police at the time. Then I became a police dog handler, and sort of obedience pet dog training went out the way. Then I became a police dog instructor. Then I retired, and obviously I enjoyed bite work. So, and I've sort of got to know Corinne over that time. So she's the one that got me into IGP. So I did it I got a 1 on a retired police dog that I did obedience with. Then I did it with Pi, who's like a lovely little pet shepherd, and got a 2 on her. And then I got one of Corinne's dogs, pups, one that Corinne bred, Bolt. And he's the only one I've done it seriously with. And he's got his 3, and we were at the FMBBs this year. And he's a little superstar.
Amazing. Excellent. And last but by no means least.
Oh yeah, I'm Kat. I'm basically into obedience, is my sort of always been my main sport. I breed Australian Shepherd, so I was doing obedience with Aussies. I made up 2 obedience champions, and with this, with my current Aussie, I basically realised that she really has a propensity for biting. It comes quite naturally for her.
That's
Right, so she just happens to be a feisty little powerful personality, fairly unusual for her breed, I'd say, and very courageous. So I was interested in IGP because of the dog training side. It's such an intricate sport for training. It's absolutely fascinating with 3 completely different elements. So from a dog training perspective, I just wanted to sample it. And Gracie's taken me all the way. She's, bless her, we've gone IGP3 and we've competed at national level. And hopefully, you know, onwards, who knows where things will go. And I'm definitely into IGP now, and yeah, positive trainer. I haven't always been, but definitely am now.
Feedback on their mic. Is that me or no? Okay, cool. All righty. So as you can see, all the 3 ladies that are speaking tonight are first and foremost, obviously, trainers that have succeeded with their dogs in the sport of IGP. So IGP, formerly called Schutzhund, formerly called IPO, now settled temporarily at IGP for the moment anyway, is essentially the canine equivalent of a triathlon. There's 3 distinct phases. There's the obedience phase, which clearly these guys have a massive amount of experience having successfully competed in obedience. You also have the tracking phase, and the tracking is very, very unique in IGP, and it has to be done in a very specific stylized manner. And the 3rd phase, which is the one that probably attracts most people to the sport, is the bite work phase, or the protection phase. And the dogs are required to show certain characteristics. IGP, Schutzhund, IPO was originally designed as a test of certain breeds and their attributes and qualities to be bred on from, and also to go into the services and military. And that's essentially what the sport is. So it's a really physically demanding sport. It's a really mentally demanding sport for the dogs, but it is an absolutely amazing sport that when you watch it done well, it is absolutely incredible to watch. The level of enthusiasm, dynamicism, if that's the word it is, or how dynamic the dogs can be. They can also be really, really deadly accurate and have all the wonderful things that we love about dog training. However, it is a sport that has a strong bias to using traditional / compulsive training, and that's really based on the history of the sport. And that's probably the most prevalent approach to that is used in IGP in some way, shape, or form. That is definitely there is flickers. It might be in varying degrees. It might be used minimally, but it might be used quite a lot depending on where and how people train. But it is an accepted part of the sport that people would use compulsion and a level of force to train their dogs for IGP. However, these 3 ladies are somewhat of an oddity, and I mean that as a compliment, in that they dare to walk a different path and they use reinforcement to train their dogs. So I thought it'd be a really interesting conversation, not to necessarily say one version is right and the other version is wrong, but just to get these ladies' insight into how they have first off come into the sport, their journey and the trials and errors that they've made with their respective dogs, and what they would advise other people that are thinking about treading this particular path. So I'm going to start with Corinne, because Corinne's been probably doing it the longest, as she mentioned before. She's probably been in the sport. It's got to be, in IGP, it's got to be 20 years, Corinne.
Yeah, 22 years.
Yeah. Considering you're only 26, you're wearing well, Corinne. You know. So tell us about, obviously you had the dog, and Corinne and Alison obviously have Malinois. Kat has a Australian Shepherd, but possibly Monday might be stumbling across a Malinois. You never know. But Corinne and Alison both have Malinois. As Alison mentioned, Corinne actually bred her dog, which is a breed that often the assumption is they need a level of, should we say, they need a level of control and they need a level of force to get the best out of them. And I would suggest that you would push back on that thinking. So tell us why you, as an individual, first, why did you get a Malinois, and what made you dare to think that you could do it differently?
So when I got my Malinois, which is from working lines, which in IGP, the majority of working lines, not show lines. So when I got mine, you really couldn't buy them in this country.
Mhm.
So my friend puppy walked for the police. She puppy walked to Malinois, and because of politics within the police force at that time, they didn't want Malinois, so they signed it over to her. Super dog. And I kind of went, I like that, I want one. And I want one just like that.
Mhm.
And she did breed it, and there were 4 of us, 4 of us who used to train together, had one of these pups, and mine was exactly like its mother. It was exactly what I wanted. And that was Quilla, and it was like, yeah. So we started doing obedience, then we started doing working trials, like I said, a group of 3 of us. And we used to meet up at a club, West Midlands, because it was central for us all. And that club was an IGP club, and a little bit of Mondio as well. So we used to watch the dogs and think, actually, this is a fun sport. And as well as our training, we used to meet up in the woods and go and hide and send the dogs after each other barking. And so it's just a good, fun thing to do. And then when we saw these people training IGP, it was like, yeah, that's what my dog wants to do. That's kind of changed the sport really to suit the dog. I think I wanted to do something more than obedience, but I wanted that style of obedience, that precision. So when I saw IGP, it was like, yeah, that's for me. And yeah. And that's how I started.
Yeah, amazing. So how about yourself, Alison? Was it just Corinne hoodwinking you into doing it? Or did you see a dog that inspired you?
It was Corinne hoodwinking me, to be honest.
Bullying.
Yeah. Like I say, I got to know Corinne through seeing her at a few obedience shows and what have you, and I wanted a Mally. Having seen them in the police and what have you, I really wanted one. And I initially was after one of the first litter of Chaska, if you remember, Corinne. And Corinne was like, "Oh, you're going to do IGP? You're going to do IGP?" But then I ended up instead. But yeah, it was purely Corinne, and obviously the police background. I enjoy the bite work. I like the exciting bit. I don't like the boring bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, so obviously once the police dogs were there no more, IGP was a natural progression. And plus Corinne badgered me and said I could only have a dog if I did IGP. And yeah, that was it. All Corinne's fault.
Yeah.
I blame many a thing on Corinne, I have to confess.
I like them all. It was your fault.
I had nothing. What did I have to do with it?
Pie. When I had Pie, I remember having a conversation with you about IGP and wanting to do IGP, and you said, "Come along to the bite work days with Craig and bring Pie."
Oh.
You're both of us.
We're letting Corinne off the hook on this one.
Yeah.
Fair of you.
Either way, it's all worked out, Alison. Thank the Lord.
Yeah.
Thank the Lord.
Yeah.
How about yourself, Kat? How did you get into? What inspired you to get into IGP then?
I was interested in it just because I saw lots of. I liked the way the dogs worked. I'd seen it televised, and I'd really liked the way the dogs work. And to be honest, I prefer the way the dogs work in their obedience in IGP to how they do in my main sport in obedience. So I was interested in that. And then I was obviously interested in looking at the bite work and all the different elements. And I don't know if you remember, Corinne, you were also responsible because I went along to a taster IGP day.
Yes, you did. I do remember. Yes.
Who was that with?
That was with Corinne.
No, with my dog.
With Gracie.
Oh.
Yeah. So I was interested in it, just sort of it's in the periphery as something interesting. And then obviously I found out that Gracie enjoyed it. So for me, it's the dogs that sort of
drive you,
decide what the sport are that I'm going to do. And she just loves it. And she loves tracking bizarrely as well. So she's got me into tracking as well. So it's brilliant. Just seeing them enjoying it is so reinforcing.
So when you first come into to IGP, Corinne, and obviously I was around at that time. I had Strut, so we had our Malinois a similar timeline here, 20 plus years ago, and it was very much the the prevalent thinking that you could not train a dog to IGP3 using reinforced. I think we were all, although I was contemplating dabbling and I never did with strut, that was definitely the thinking. All the helpers that came over were very like, you won't be able to do it with you won't be able to use R+ methods to train a dog to any level in IGP. That was definitely I would say. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So what made you think, and what was the first, what gave you the conviction? Obviously, you had peers that you trained with. First, shout out to Jo Hill. Jo Hill was really integral in that process because she was such an innovative thinking, she has such an innovative mind for dog training. She really started to look at the sport from a very different perspective, and I'd say that was quite a crucial part of it, because I think that Jo, being Jo, didn't look at it from, oh, how do I do what they do, this version. She went, I'm going to have to change it or come up with it, different things to achieve the same end goal.
And so, as you say, I trained with Jo. Jo was my mentor for donkey's years. Mm-hmm. And so going into the sport with Jo at my side was made it easier. Mm-hmm. But there was no decision to, for me, there was no decision to look at the sport and go, how am I going to train it this way as opposed to that way? Mm. Because my way then was it was all I knew. So for me to have started doing it a different way, it would have been just so alien, because that's just not me. It's just not how I train. So all that was needed, with Jo's help, was looking at these little things and going, how can we get that with a ball, or how can we get that with food? Mm. And really, I mean, if you think about how we train, a lot of us, we put our dogs in such a state that it actually wants that reward, and it's we teach them, let's take the food, let's take the ball, whatever, and they get such a buzz out of it that it actually makes it easy. Maybe not easy, but it's not difficult, is it? So when you've got something that your dog wants, and Alison will say, she says about my dog that doing obedience on the protection field, she's super, because her reward is there on the field, and all she needs to learn is do ABC to get what you want. Yeah. And so it kind of wasn't really difficult. Mm-hmm. I know it's difficult, but do you know what I mean? It wasn't a big like, wow, that's amazing that you've done that, because it was just everything we did in training, whether it be a send away in obedience or an escape biting protection, that foundation work of, if you do this to get that reward, you will get that reward. And it just followed through in all the training.
Yeah. The thing that I would, being I suppose an outsider looking in, obviously I played around. Well, I definitely trained IGP behaviours with punch and swagger before that. And whilst I never got to the point of competing in the protection phase, certainly with punch, the learning curve was, if the dog understands the connection between how to earn the reinforcement, that's the game, that's the magic source, because the dog is now no longer in conflict with how to access the reward, or that in this case of IGP, the helper or the bite. The dog understands it's an equation it's a problem to solve. And what my experience, and obviously coaching various people in IGP, is it actually works for you, because it actually empowers the dog, because the dog actually will perform behaviors sharper, more proficiently, because they understand they hold the key to unlock the access to the thing that they want most, which is the biting entity, and certainly in the protection phase. So what was obviously, Alison, you came from a background of using traditional approaches to protection in terms of your law enforcement, or would that be fair to say? And what was your shift? What made you think that you could do it take an alternative path?
Yeah, in fairness, in the police, obviously it can't be positive all the time, but predominantly it was, especially in the bite work, especially in the outs and stuff like that, because the only way you're going to do that in a short period of time is to reward the dog every time you tell it out. And so it was predominantly positive. And again, positive training was all I knew. That was the first place I went to train. It was positive training. So that's what I did. The big shift for me was a retired police dog I had, Sam, who was quite aggressive. And he was a bit of a handful. And I quickly realised that I couldn't fight fire with fire.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's not me. I'm not, you know, I'm a fairly gentle person,
Mm-hmm.
and I wasn't strong enough to fight that fire with fire. So
Mm-hmm.
I shifted the other way with Sam, and it's sort of my mantra became to people, be nice to Sam and Sam will be nice to you. And that worked. And I never had a problem with him. And, you know, so, and that was the big thing that made me go, do you know what? This is a much better way, especially for me with a very powerful, driven dog. Because obviously that's the crux of IGP, isn't so much the training, the specific exercises, it's the dog itself, and the dog being dominant and fighting on the sleeve and having calm grips and clean
Outs.
Yeah, and then going from that dominant active guarding to fairly passive and doing heel work, you know, switching his drives. So yeah, for me, I just see that as easier to do positively, but only because it's all I know.
Yeah.
You know, I could have taken a different route if I'd started training elsewhere to start with. But then, and then Corinne is my Joe Hill, so she sort of has guided me through how to train IGP the way we train it, and you know, teaching everything to the dogs in a lower arousal and then bringing it up and up and up. So I find easy is the wrong word, but I don't find it hard. You know, it's hard. Dog training's hard.
Yeah.
I don't think.
I suppose a better term would be. Would a fairer term? Sorry, Alison. Sorry, go on, carry on.
No, I just say I don't think to myself, "Gosh, I'm making this harder than it has to be."
Would it be a fair word to, rather than saying easy, because like you say, dog training it comes more naturally to take this route as opposed to using one that's more combative? Would that be a fairer word to you?
Yes, it's all I know.
Yeah, more natural to who you are as an individual, and obviously the way in which you are with your dogs. So, Kat, you're a little bit of an anomaly, and again, I mean that as a compliment. You have an unusual breed of dog, so there is an assumption that you know, reinforcement-based dog training, great, it'll work on your little fluffy Aussie because she's a fluffy Aussie. So was that what propelled you to use reinforcement-based dog training to do IGP, or was it because of another reason?
Yeah, it's for me it is a bit of an ethics thing, because I did start off training traditionally and I don't like it. It's not for me. It's not for me. I don't like it. And luckily I've got a breed that won't accept it. So that kind of has worked out nicely for me. Aussies are very, very capable of putting their fingers up and just saying, absolutely don't worry about it. You know, if you're going to do that to me, I am not in. So they're a very different kind of dog, obviously, to a Malinois. You know, having said that, if Gracie, she's a serious little dog when she's on the field. She has no idea that she's tiny and fluffy, and she takes herself very seriously. And, you know, she's coming out there with a degree of aggression. And I think a lot of folks, you know, would be tempted to deal with that, you know, with tools or whatever. But like I say, it's just not my way. And it's not about for me, that wouldn't be the relationship that I would want with her. I wouldn't want her being scared of me. I wouldn't want her thinking, oh, what's going to happen, or feeling conflicted when she's coming onto the field. It's really important that when we're training, she thinks everything that's going to happen here is going to be great. And that's important to me.
Yeah, great. So, Corinne, what would be, obviously, from the time span that you've been doing IGP and specifically using this approach, there must have been lots of trials and errors along that way. So when you first, what would you say was the biggest errors that you made in your initial version of training?
Probably too many rewards. Do you know what? Just constantly rewarding, because I want to reward. I want to reward more. And I think, sort of get rid of those rewards. And I still struggle today with that. So yeah, getting rid of the rewards and that. And also, I'm not a confident person, so I kind of think the biggest, probably, the early on was not finding my own way. So I had a fantastic mentor, and then when I started kind of training without Joe, if you like, because I can't remember why, I had to find my own way. And I think that little transition was difficult, but it was the best thing for me, because then I had to do my own thing. And that was my big learning curve. That was like, oh, okay, actually, I can make these decisions. And only because of that background of training. We've lost you, Kamal.
That's all right. I'm still here.
Okay.
Sorry.
So yeah, I think that was difficult, just sort of finding my own way. But then when I did find my own way, I got all that knowledge that had been passed to me, and it was then I'm working things out and thinking outside the box. So I think prior to that, I relied on other people too much, and I also relied on just rewarding the dog constantly rather than letting the dog work things out.
Yeah, I would say so. I think that's a natural path, isn't it? When you have been when you've been a mentee, to find your own path is a healthy progression for all of us. I think it's really healthy to immerse yourself with one approach. So if you're contemplating doing, for example, IGP or bite work with the dog and using this approach or using reinforcement-based methods, my advice is to immerse yourself with one thinking so that you don't confuse yourself. And then once you've got almost a blueprint, then you can start to add things that you think are going to complement or find your own distinct individual path. I think that's that I would say that was applicable for all training. So from your experience, you talked about over rewarding. I would say that's something that's quite common irrespective of the sport. I think that's quite people that gravitate to reinforcement-based dog trainers. Part of the allure is we love to reward our dogs. We find it reinforcing to reward the dog, and the interaction, the little dopamine hit that we get from whatever it is that the dog does. I think that's a classic entity where a lot of people can often fall short. And I'd say, irrespective, and obviously coaching a lot of people in a lot of different sports, that's a hurdle that everybody has to cross, in that if they want to compete at successfully at a sport, and certainly if you want to push to that next level of an elite level of competition, you need to have a level of reliability. And part of that is to go out and do training and to essentially do the test as per the competition and as in training, obviously. But that would be the first hurdle before you venture out into the big wide world. That often can be where I would say reinforcement-based dog trainers fall short. Their reluctance to say to the dog, you can do 3 or 4 things for one reward, because we get addicted to the reinforcement process. So, Kat, that's something that you've had issues with your dog. So do you want to just speak to that point about your experience of training and how that being a necessary evil?
Yeah, I think what I've found is that it depends on the dog as to how much to do and what you can do and how much to, quote, let your dog get away with. Depends on the strength of the dog's personality and the relationship. Gracie, because she's quite a hard dog, I can't let her get away with anything. She sees a chink in my armor, and she, I have to train her quite hard, as in I can't give her snacks all the time for breathing and looking cute, which is a real shame. Yeah, and I'd love to, but if I do that, then she'll just kind of, she just takes the mickey. And the thing then is, because she does enjoy doing the work, she then turns slouchy, and she turns into a dog that doesn't enjoy her work, which is actually quite interesting. So she kind of gets complacent when
I would just interject and push back, because I would say to look at it that way is it's doing an injustice to the dog. In fairness, dogs will do what is reinforced. So if you say to the dog, you do a sit, you get reinforcement, you do a down, you get reinforcement, you do a hand touch, you get reinforcement. When you have the audacity to say, could you do a down, a sit and a hand touch, they'll say, hang on a second, where's my terms of contact that you've now changed the goalpost? I think that's the difference between a dog that has an aptitude to do the sport, for example, a breed like a Malinois or working line German Shepherd. What tends to happen with those types of dogs is the desire to do the work itself takes over. So they almost see the sit, the down, and the hand touch as almost the icing on the cake. They're in the game anyway. When you have a breed of dog that isn't necessarily quite so doesn't find the behaviors so self-reinforcing, you have to be better at your reinforcement intervals. And because to say, to view it as the dog is doing it, to one up us, I would say actually it's a little bit unfair on the dog, because the dog is doing it to reinforce. Yeah.
No, and that's absolutely not what I meant. If it came across that way, no, that's not what I meant. No, she doesn't. No, absolutely right. She's very straightforward, and she doesn't do anything to one up. I'm absolutely convinced that that's true. Yeah. But a dog like Shanti, for example, my previous Aussie, she needed a lot more reinforcement because she sort of lacked in confidence as well a little bit. And she was a little bit lazier, and she was the kind of dog that needed a little bit more coaching through it. Whereas with Gracie, she enjoys a challenge, I would say. So with Gracie, if I say, okay, now you're going to work for 12 minutes without a thing, she'll be like, oh, okay, I'm going to dig deep. This is going to be really fun. She kind of gets into that. So different personality.
Yeah. So, Alison, how about from your perspective? You've got a male Malinois, so and he's from, obviously, Corinne bred him, and he's from very typical working lines, which produces a certain ilk of dog, a dog that has a desire to work. They love the aggression, they like the tugging, they like all that intensity. So, what has been your learning curve with a dog like that to create a dog that is of that type, but yet is compliant and is obedient and is responsive? What has been your learning curve, and what has been your mistakes and your learning from it?
The big, especially with a big bolshy male, it's the hard part is when you train our way is control, knowing how much to put in when. I probably put a little bit too much into Bolt when he was younger. But it's sort of knowing when to let them just be a Malinois, and then when to start putting that control in, and that's the real balancing, the art, I would say, to training a dog for bite work, because you've got to let, in your words, the genie out the bottle. You've got to have this big, strong, bolshy dog that thinks it can take on the world, and is very dominant. But you've got to be able to control that. And you've also got to not let the dog, it can't just think it's big and crazy.
As he is now, he's demonstrating his dominance now as he puts his arse in your face.
It's also got to be really well controlled, and it's got to be able to switch its drives, and that's I think that's where the big area that you can make mistakes in positive training. And it's also because obviously IGP is not
just on that point, I would say I think that is the challenge of IGP. I don't think that's unique to reinforcement-based dog training. I think the beauty and the Rubik's Cube of IGP is exactly that. It's finding the balance between you having absolute ultimate power and drive and desire and absolute control, and the dog being able to switch those two things like with the one cue. So the dog can go from being, like you say, full on guarding, really imposing, threatening the helper, you dare move and I'm going to rip your arm off, to instantaneously then reverting to bang, heel position, boom, deadly silent, switch to being stoic and stealth-like and almost predatory, and then connecting with the handler, walking like almost like they're stalking the helper, daring them to run away, boom, and they take off. It is that's the appeal of it, isn't it? And I don't think that conflict is necessarily unique to reinforcement-based training. I think that is the beauty of the sport. That is the appeal. And anybody that's ever watched IGP done well, it is the absolute unison between the two things and perfect balance. And I think that's where traditionally that control is established or gained by using compulsion or a level of force. So how how do you interweave it into your training then, Corinne? How do you create control? And I would say actually, and please interject if you think this is wrong, I would say that the control comes naturally to certainly the three people that I'm speaking to now, because one, of their background in obedience, two, control is about criteria. And if you're a fanatical obedience-minded person, you're going to be into the criteria of the quality of the sit and the dog having all its 4 feet in a certain position, or the hand touch. And our sausages are cut up into tiny little pieces. We're really sad and anal about those things, but it is almost, that bit comes quite almost natural to us. We like the having been really picky about the details. So how do you achieve that with your dogs, Corinne, and how do you strike the balance?
It's from day one, isn't it? So it's exactly what you just said. Those little. So I'm very, and Alison I'm like ABC, ABC, AB, and then and then Alison's AB, X, Y, Z. But it's those little. I mean, I'm joking, but early on we get that control over little things, don't we? So we might say, I don't know, a place board, for example. Go to your place board, and your criteria is very strict, and this is what I want you to do. And to do that, you'll then get your reward. So then to move it on, it's just a natural progression, isn't it? So you might have a dog that's a bit excited, and you want to keep that excitement. Then you want to go, no, you need to be a little bit calmer. So those kind of things are started early with a young dog, and for little things, like I say, it might be do a little hand touch, and then explode into go and get your ball reward, and let's have a game of tuggy, and then straight away let's switch back into something calm. So early on you're doing that. It's not kind of like today we're doing all this reward-based training, and then we come to the protection field and now I need control. It's just all during the dog's life. It's just how we train, isn't it? We reward, but we stick to those little intricate details where we're saying, I want you to do that, and you're going to do it like this, but you're going to get a mega reward. And obviously we do that. The training, it's all we're very clear, I think, with our rewards, our reviews, everything's very clear, and it has to be clear. And then when we introduce that to this high arousal sport, everything early on, that foundation work is so clear that it's again, it's not easy, but we're giving the dog a chance, aren't we? We've explained things.
So I would say actually that would be one of the major distinct differences with more traditional approaches to IGP or to Bitework. I would say that generally what happens with Bitework is they compartmentalize the two things. So you do the technical training primarily with food, and you would use a ball or some sort of reinforcement that to invoke prey, etc., or tugging, etc. And then the dog is then very separately. The dog is then built, the desire is created for biting and tug tour, and that's normally done through frustration, i.e. the dog's on the harness, it's held, the dog is then with various techniques, the dog is then encouraged to be vocal and just invoke its drive, etc., etc. So those two things initially are done very separately, and then they bring the two things together. And I would say that's a major difference between how I'd say the likes of the people on the panel here is that those two things are done simultaneously from the get-go. So with your young dog, it's taught very early how to earn the bite. It's taught how to offer a very static, still behavior to access a really, really high drive, fast moving game. And I think that's a major, major difference. And ultimately, what can help those of you that are thinking about taking this path achieve the successes that the people on the panel have done. So from your experience, Kat, you obviously came into IGP later with a dog that was somewhat trained. She was already a obedience champion. Would you say, in hindsight, that helped or hindered your path into IGP?
I think both.
Okay.
In a way, it helped. Because obviously I did have that control, and if I tell her the out, she will out, and there's no questions about any of those things. But for me, the difficult thing then was releasing the beast, telling her it's okay to go and muller that guy. It's okay to go and do that thing on your own. Because there's a lot in IGP, which is actually you're a long way away from your dog. And your dog kind of needs to be bold enough to make those decisions without you around and to be, really comfortable working on independently. And of course, obedience isn't about working independently. Yeah. So I had to teach her how to work independently and give her that confidence. It's like, it's absolutely fine. You can go and do that. And to be honest, I think being positive has helped in that, because she knows there's going to be no negative consequence. It would, the only negative thing for her was, at first, it was confusion. It was hang on, but what do you think of this, Mum? Like, this is what this guy's doing, but where are you? So I had to kind of take myself out of the picture and get her confident working with the helper. So it was, I think, for my next dog is going to be a Malinois, and I am going to do IGP mostly with it. And I am going to put in, obviously it's going to be a different kind of dog, but I'm going to put in more, like Corinne's saying, both at the same time. Put in the wildness with the control, and hopefully get that balance at the beginning. But so the dog has that sort of understanding, small steps. It's like, okay, I understand this, then I can increase the arousal. And with the out, being very clear on, okay, this is for a toy swap, this is for food. And again, it's that sort of really clarity, which I'm thinking is going to be the thing which will help me along the way.
Yeah. So let's talk about that then, because you brought it up. I would say one of the common areas where there is a parting of ways in terms of approaches and thinking is when it comes to control, and specifically the release or the out. That's where the argument would be made for, you have a big, powerful dog, a Malinois or a German Shepherd or a Rottweiler, etc., and that dog says, no, I'm not releasing on that sleeve, which happens. It's going to happen. Mark the day. It doesn't matter how it's been trained. It is at some point going to say, no, I'm not prepared to do that. And if you've done your job right, the dog should do that, because the dog should, again, it's that constant balance. So there's a balance now. You've let a bit more genie out the bottle. So now you need to put the genie back a little bit with some level of control. So how do you do that and not use an alternative approach? How do you do it, Corinne?
Oh, that's I found that really interesting, that question, because of all of the IGP exercises, the out is not the most difficult. With the way we train,
outs are point, aren't they? Our dogs rarely fail to out. In fact, never. Well, the FMBBs, you did need to come out. As a rule.
But generally, sorry, I'm over speaking. But generally, it's not. It really is not the most difficult exercise to teach. It's because we do it all. We do it, don't we, from day one with our little puppies. We do it from day one, and we do use food. And it doesn't mean that the dog. Some people have an idea that we're stood on a protection field with a piece of cheese going out. We don't do that. We build in this history of reinforcement. So you're going to out, and you're going to, you might do a slow out initially when you're a baby puppy, but we built in that much reinforcement that it's just automatic, isn't it? That response to let go of that sleeve. And we don't just teach. I'm saying we, but I know Alison's very similar. We don't just teach out to let go of the sleeve. We've got a huge process in the history of trust behind that dog, where we're teaching. It's not about, I'm not going to take that sleeve off you. I'm not going to possess your belonging. That's your. Where a lot of people have let go of the sleeve, and the dog. What I'm trying to say is, our dogs are not losing a sleeve. We're asking them to out. They're outing. They'll probably get the sleeve back, or they'll get something else back. But it's never about, you're going to lose that possession. And throughout the training as a puppy, we're going to be using mainly food or another toy, and we've built that history of let go of that to get this, and you'll possibly get that back again. So that belief of there's no conflict there, and the belief is, yeah, I'll let go because it's kind of not a big deal. It's not about letting go. It's about other things. You let go and you get a reward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to sort of just give, obviously, you know, having coached a lot of people in various sports, you see the same issues, I would say, in bite work that you often see come across in agility. And I would say it's because the foundation and you get the same approaches, and therefore you get the same issues and it's about control. So with both bite work and agility, the very traditional approaches to training those dogs for their sports is to utilize frustration, i.e. restrain the dog, tease the dog at a distance, and then that creates the belief of desire. And I absolutely think there is a place for that to happen, to create desire for the object, the toy, the owner, whatever the case may be. That's absolutely an asset to building desire. However, what I would say is where you see it becoming a problem and actually contributing to the larger problem is when that's done to the extreme, or you have a dog that has a high desire or has a low threshold of frustration, which is very common in working dogs. You see that very, very common in Malinois, high working line, where they don't have a huge tolerance to frustration. So you've got a dog that's easily frustrated, and we're using frustration to train it. So that in itself can create issues. The other thing, which definitely I say is unique more to bite work, is you have dogs that are genetically predisposed to being possessive, and we use possession as a reinforcement process. A traditional picture that is done in IGP is you would use frustration, the handler holds the dog is excited, the dog then gets the sleeve, and the dog is then encouraged to carry it and possess it. So you've got a dog that's predisposed to those things anyway, i.e. being low threshold of frustration and is incredibly possessive, and we're actually building more of that within the dog. Well, to me, I would say that's where often that can contribute to the long-term issues, because the dog already has a low threshold to frustration. Me amplifying that is not going to probably be in its benefit. And additionally, overkill of the possession entity can often create a dog that's naturally possessive. Now the dog goes, I'm already predisposed to that, and now you're almost reinforcing it further. So it's a bit like if I have a border collie that likes to run and run and run, and I allow it to fence chase and chase scooters, etc. And then I wonder why that dog who was previously predisposed to that characteristic or that behavior, why I now have a problem. So my take on it is to not do that to the extreme. Definitely sow the seed, do it to the point of where you feel that you've awakened let the gene out of the bottle a little bit, but don't keep on doing it, because then what happens is you think of reinforcement history. The dog is getting a massive amount of reinforcement for being for reacting very quickly and not developing frustration tolerance. The dog is having a massive reinforcement history for possession. And now I'm saying to the dog, oh, could you be calm and not respond to the thing in front of you that's causing you to be frustrated? And can you also release the sleeve? So those two things often can underpin why you often see issues. So again, things that I would certainly advise people to do is to build in the dog understanding how to turn the key to access the reinforcement. Definitely for me, and it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts, is reward specific markers. For me, you cannot train a dog successfully using reinforcement based training without the dog having a salient understanding of reinforcement specific markers, i.e. you can bite the sleeve, you're getting marked for barking, and the sleeve's going to come to you, or the ball's going to come to you, or it's going to be food, or you're going to chase something. For me, I don't think it's possible to train it well without the dog absolutely understanding reward markers. I think they are the key thing if you are thinking about doing it this approach. What are your thoughts then? Let's go with Kat. What's your thoughts about reward specific markers?
Yeah, I use them. Yeah, get the food, get the toy, chase the thing, get it behind, get it on the person, get the sleeve, all different markers. Yeah, it just increases clarity, and that's the key, isn't it? We're just trying to communicate to our dogs what we want them to do. They're willing, they want to do it. It's just the communication that often doesn't go well. So anything that increases that clarity of communication, 100%.
Yeah. How about yourself, Alison? Do you have them and do you use them? What's your thoughts on them?
I have them, and I use them a lot in obedience. I use them a lot in tracking. I don't use them so much in bite work. Just to go back to sort of about what Corinne said and the foundations. What's worked for me in Bolt is errorless learning as much as possible from a pup, so that I've never put him in a position whereby he will get something wrong, or whereby he will not be able to do what I ask him to do, because I'm very conscious that if he does know that he can do, that he doesn't have to do what I tell him to do, I have no backup.
Right.
So that's sort of my foundations. And if to describe my training, it would be honesty and trust. I'll never take anything that gets taken off him from day dot will always be given back, even if it's like a book I have to sacrifice. It's that honesty and trust between us. So to go back to reward specific markers, the thing I think they're best for, in fairness, is, like I say, for me, tracking and obedience. I use them not as much in protection, but then I'm more of a sort of straightforward protection. Like, you know, Corinne likes all that. Like Corinne says, she's an ABC, ABC, ABC. I'm like, right, we've got the basics. The dog does as he's told. Let's see what we've got.
Right.
So I call myself an organic trainer. So yeah, reward specific markers, you definitely need them. But yeah, I don't use them so much in protection.
How about you? Sorry, Alison, sorry. How about your take on them, Corinne? What's your thoughts?
Yes, I do use them, and I do I also, with the dog I'm training at the minute, Cersei, I do a variation on reward specific. So I use them in conjunction with what I call reward cues. So I have, as you have, the reward specific. So I might have grab, which means come in front and grab your ball, and I might have come behind and grab your ball, and the word is the marker and tells the dog where and how to get that reward. But with her, because of that little dopamine rush that she gets can send her a little bit crazy. So if I do only those, a little bit crazy, she can get over aroused. So now I do a mixture of reward specific, and I don't know what the real term is, but I call them reward cues. So I have a generic yes, and then you need to listen to your reward cue. So I now might say yes, grab, or yes, come behind, and that is, she's not now anticipating the reward, she's waiting for the marker and then waits to tell her which reward, and that's brought down excitement a little bit. But again, it's a balancing act, because if I only do that, then I've got a calmer dog than I want. She's thinking, but that energy is a little bit lower than I want. So I do a mix now of yes, grab, or sometimes I might say grab, and we'll have a session of reward specifics, and then I'll look at that balance and then go, oh, actually, you're getting a little bit over aroused. I now need to go back to my reward cues. So that's what I'm doing with her. Yeah.
So in terms of, obviously, as we said at the beginning of the conversation, the assumption was that you could not train a dog to a certainly elite level or a national level or world championship level using reinforcement-based markers, and reward-based training. And if you did, it's because the dog was a weaker, lesser dog. So what would be your thinking on that? Corinne, obviously you breed Malinois. What's your thoughts on that?
It's kind of chicken and egg, isn't it? Which comes first? Is it the training that makes the dog, or the dog responding to the training? So maybe, I always think of Chaska, where people used to think she was a very not a strong dog, but she didn't show that strength, but she had the strength. So she worked on a lot of top helpers that were quite hard, and she was like, yeah, I can do that. But she didn't come on the field and you didn't go, God, this is a crazy dog here, because she wasn't crazy. But was that a result of the training? She didn't need to show that like real aggression, and So I kind of think it's like Alison said, didn't it, about what she said about Sam? You know, be nice to Sam, Sam will be nice to you. And if she'd have, she'd have sort of been aggressive with him, he'd have probably brought it on a bit more. So I think sometimes, is it the dog or is it the training? You know, has the training caused the dog to be that kind of appear to be a nice, easygoing dog? And I think Quilla, I mean, she was very, very strong, as was her mother. But, you know, you may not have seen that. It was just the training. Do you know what I'm saying? They didn't need to show that aggression. And
and I'd say, for me, so my take on it is, I think there's a misconception between dogs that are in drive and ones that are aroused. And I think that a lot of sports can identify a very aroused dog and misinterpret that as a dog that's driven. So for me, a truly driven dog that has all those things that we've talked about, irrespective of the sport, whether it's obedience, agility, Mondio ring, IGP, doesn't matter, working trials, whatever. For me, the dog should be waiting for instruction or responding to the picture, and then it should understand to turn that off and on. And for me, the ultimate illustration of that is if you watch a dog at the International Supreme Championship, you don't see them in contrast if you looked at agility dogs, and I'm not judging agility dogs, but you would see them all barking, getting frenzied, and shaking their toys. You'd never see that at, you know, in a sheepdog event, because the dogs are all tethered with a bit of baling twine to the back of their Land Rovers, and they nonchalantly walk off, shake off, and they then, as soon as they understand that the job is about to start, they totally morph. And to me, that is the ultimate illustration of a dog that is in drive and understands the time and place when it's necessary to use those things that are God-given, as opposed to the dog just, you know, if it coming onto a field and being all frantic and hectic. For me, that's not a dog in drive. It's a dog that's very aroused. And I think that's where often there's a misinterpretation and the assumption that your dog is lesser because it does have clarity. It isn't then baying like a wolf because it understands the criteria for each behavior. And I think that's something that we need to be aware of. How about yourself, Alison? You've got a male Malinois from Working Lines. Is he a weak dog, and is that why you've used your pink and fluffy training to succeed?
That's probably what people think. No, like I say, and I always go back to, like, you know, like Corinne says, Big Sam, be nice to him and he'll be nice to you. He's like, and it's exactly what you were saying about drive and arousal, you know, and he's learned, I've taught him, and to be fair, waiting to go and do protection at the World Championships, all the dogs are outside. They're not crazy. They're not barking and lunging. They're all calm, and that drive will come on with the switch when you say revere, the drive comes. And so it is all, you'll never know whether it's, I'll never know whether it's because, you know, Bolt's an easy, he's definitely not a soft dog by any stretch of imagination, you know, and I'll never know whether he's got to where he is because he's an easy dog to train, because it's that chicken and egg thing, isn't it? I absolutely think that it's doable to get to any level you want with our kind of training. It's not, as you said in the start, it's not the traditional way to doing it. It's not the way the top trainers train. So it's all chicken and egg. But I think it's absolutely doable, even with a big bolshy male. But you have to be that personality to be able to deal with the big bolshy male. Like Corinne is brilliant with the bitches. You know, she likes their sensitiveness. But I don't like that.
No, I like naughtiness.
Yes, but you also like their naughtiness and the fact that you have to think way more.
Yeah,
you know, it's so you'll never. It's like I say, it's chicken and egg. Is it me? Is it the dog? Is it the training? Who knows? Whatever it is, it works.
Yeah. How about yourself? I mean, the irony with Grace is actually a really strong little dog. Grace is most definitely a weak little dog at all.
No, I took her along to training classes, you know, when she was 8 weeks or something, and she was trying to have a pop at a 6-month German Shepherd. You know, she's a strong bitch, which I've channeled, you know, and now she knows where she can put her stuff. And that's the thing. It's like Alison said, you'll never know how much is the dog and how much is the training. You just can't separate them. And people are always going to say, oh, it's because this, that, and the other. And to be honest, there's always going to be people who are always going to say, if you had XYZ, You know, and you can't, all you can say is this works for me with what I'm doing, with where I'm at now. And you can't sort of put yourself in other people's shoes, can you? And you can just say, it is possible, and just give it a go. But, you know, I think that the thing is you have to be clearer as a dog trainer. And I would say fairer, because I think it's fair, because we're not sort of punishing our dog for things that they don't properly understand. They need to understand it. They need to understand it 100%. And like Alison says, you know, it's like, you know, they need to be able to get it right, because there's no consequence. So I think that just makes you a better trainer. So it's for anybody who wants to improve their training skills.
I think you have to be more mindful. I think you definitely have to be more mindful when you're taking this approach, because I would say the big thing, if you're looking at different approaches, there's far more examples how to do it well and not do it not so well to fall back on if you're using a more traditional approach. So if you encounter a problem using a traditional approach of training for bite work, there's 100 different versions of how to sort the problem out, and there's 100 people that could tell you how to sort the problem out. The fallout I always say is that definitely with reinforcement-based training, it's far more in its infancy. You have to a little bit, you know, it can be willing to experiment. You have to be willing to try different things. You have to be willing to think outside the box. And for me, that's what is most invigorating about dog training in general, the fact that each dog presents new problems and challenges and so forth. So on a final note, let's just talk to the point of what has your reception been from the IGP community when you have dared to tread a different path, and specifically the helpers, who helpers are held in a great deal of reverence in the sport, and like, you know, obviously they're the people that are going to help you train your dog. What has been each of your experience with the community and the helpers? Because I'd say that is where often people have an assumption. I would argue that it isn't necessarily the correct assumption. So what's your experience, Corinne?
From day one, brilliant. Yeah, I've never ever. I think what's in never ever. I had very little problems. So, but I'm also clear with my helpers, and I think today a lot of helpers know me anyway. But I am quite clear, or I was early on. People know now. You can do this. You can do that. I don't want you to do whatever. But yeah, I think early on, like really early on, the first year we were training, I think there was one person that said, oh, they'll never do it. They'll never do it. He doesn't do the sport anymore. I do. But yeah, I've never found an issue. I think what one of the issues is people want to do the sport. Not everyone, but some people, and I have had people tell me this, they want to do the sport and they can't get into a club. And then you'll say, well, you know, you might ask them a little bit and they say, yeah, I don't really want to commit to the sport, but I want to have a go at it. But the helpers and the trainers at clubs have not really got time, because
Absolutely.
You know, there's only a small amount of time, and if they've got 20, 30 dogs, they want to concentrate.
Especially in this country, it's not like it's not their vocation; it's what they do at the weekend. So you're absolutely right, Corinne. I think that's where if you're going to play at it, I think people will take more issue with that, because they're there and they're committed to the process. If you're going to dabble, then it's like, well, I could be investing my energies and effort into somebody that's truly committed to the sport. And I think that is where I think you can create more issue.
Yeah.
Definitely, 100%.
I've had so many people who they'll take bits of what we do. They'll look at that, and like one trainer in Scotland, like Jock, who I used to train with, he would say to me, "I like that coin. I'm going to steal it." And I would say, "You can't steal it because it's a gift."
Yeah.
And that I like that they're taking on board things, you know, and it's making their training that little bit better, for want of a better word. But I've never had anyone who sort of looked down their nose at me or anything. I mean, maybe they do it behind my back, I don't know. But everyone's been really positive and really welcoming. Always have been. Yeah.
How about yourself, Alison?
Yeah, I've never had any issues at all. I've been lucky in that obviously Corinne's been my mentor, so I've been everywhere with Corinne to introduce me. I think the only problem with positive bite work is you have to know what you want. You have to be able to tell the helpers what you want, because that's not their, they don't know how we train. They don't understand, or I'm using that very generically, but you know, we have to explain, like Corinne says, this is what I want you to do, this is what I don't want you to do. So you have to have, it's hard if you don't have somebody to, like Corinne, to hold your hand and say, you know, this is how we do it. But I've never had it. Oh, apart from somebody who did tell me it would all end in disaster.
Yeah.
I only said that once, Alison. For God's sake, get over it.
Yeah, I haven't still got the video clip of him standing there shaking his head as I walked off the field, going, "It can be, but it'll all end in disaster." But no, I've had everybody's. Yeah, I've never had an issue at all. No, but none whatsoever. Everybody's been more than welcoming, more than happy. I take the mickey out of them for the way they train. They take the mickey out of me, and that's how it should.
Yeah, a bit of banter. Yeah, dedefinitely.
Absolutely.
It's not. I mean, I remember when you used to turn up with your chucket stick, Corinne. You'd get all sorts of like, sort of colourful comments, but done in good humour. And I think that's the big thing. As long as you go in there, I would say this to anybody starting in any sport: go in there and be respectful to those that have gone before. I think that's any sport, any culture, etc. Be respectful of the people that have been there, done it, and got the t-shirt. And, you know, just show your enthusiasm and commitment, and be open-minded and operate from a place without judgment. You know, you can agree to disagree, and go, as long as you do so in a respectful way. And if there's something that you're not, you know, you don't want to be partaking or see, just take yourself out of the equation. You know, nobody's forcing you to remain in that situation. And as long as you don't do it in a combative manner, I think most you know, the bits that I've done with IGP, they've always been really, 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 really helpful and really passionate about the sport and seeing it prevail. How about Kat? How about you, Kat? What has been your experience as
yeah, I'd say 99%. Like you said, I think most people have been quite curious, interested, quite open-minded, you know, nice, kind, welcoming. I think a couple of people feel a bit defensive. I've had defensiveness even when I've not said anything. You know, they're sort of starting to justify, you know, what they're doing, and I'm kind of like, I don't, you know, your thing is your thing, do your thing. So I've had bits of defensiveness, but to be honest, most people, 99%, have been absolutely lovely. And
we have to remember, these are the people we're learning off. You know, these are people that have been in the sport for 30, 40 years. You know, we have to, you have to respect their knowledge. You know, that's.
I would say, Alison, I think that's in all, like, you see that very much in obedience, and that, you know, obviously obedience is something that I've been doing for a little while. I think that often you can find when somebody comes into the sport and sort of points the fingers and says, "Oh, you're all wrong and I'm right," it does make you go, "Hang on a second, you've only just come to the party, you know, like, simmer down, have your seat, and then when you've shown your due diligence, then you can, you know, partake." I don't necessarily think that certainly from an obedience point of view, it's necessarily healthy to always have a closed-minded viewpoint when it is somebody new, because sometimes they can give you a fresh eyes on it, and that's healthy. But obviously, it's all about the delivery. But I would say definitely most people in all sports, as long as you're again, like, all, it doesn't matter whether it's dog training or a knitting club or whatever, as long as you go there with the right intentions, I think most people are supportive. So I don't know, there is a couple of comments and questions before we draw things to a close. I'm mindful that these guys are giving up their time to have this conversation, so I'm going to just see if there's a couple of comments. So I know Arancha, my good friend Arancha, she's asked a couple. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd love being able to see you. Respect about your conversation. Here in my country, I've seen many handlers need to have more communication and greater obedience. If not, there's a lot of problems with the dogs staying aggression. So these handlers have to get other types of tools because they don't have obedience. So I'd say that I think what we're gaining from that is that in the importance of having a really good foundation of the dog being responsive and focused on you. And without that, that can also drive you to have to use other approaches, irrespective of whether it's for a sport or not, using a compulsion or force, because actually the dog doesn't really have that foundation. It's always about education. I think that's the point that was being made. Let's have a look. What else? Oh, this is a good one from Rancho again. So I would like to know what you look for when you choose a puppy to compete. What qualities are you looking for and the genetics? Corinne?
I don't know. I don't know. I've had it easy. I mean, I really have had it easy because my first man and wife came from Sue's Luca, who was super, and I kind of went for the cutest, littlest, smallest.
That's really deep. Yeah.
Yeah,
Cute.
and then we.
Corinne thing to do. Oh, it's cute.
Well, it was. Well, they were all cute. But this guy came and did some puppy testing, and he was the only one. He said, "I wouldn't have that one," and I kind of went, "She's mine."
Yeah.
And she turned out one of the best. And then from that, I had Tesh. Can't think why I chose Tesh. I think so. So for Tesh, it was the genetics. It was purely the genetics, and I probably shouldn't have had her from those genetics. And then again, I bred Chaska, and they're just two nice females. And to be honest, I could have had any of that litter. It wasn't. It was just that one. You know, nothing stood out. They were all nice, confident puppies, but not sort of idiots. So I don't look for that little idiot that's ragging everything. I just want a nice mediocre dog, really, because it's not just going to be a sports dog, is it? It's going to be a pet dog as well.
That's an interesting point. I think that's more the point, Corinne. I think that for me, I certainly, I breed border collies, not necessarily, not Malinois, not yet anyway. And I think that the picking puppies for anybody is not necessarily about finding the perfect puppy, or it always makes me laugh when people say, which is the pick of the litter? Because my pushback on that is the pick of the litter for whom? Because what would suit me wouldn't suit Corinne, or might suit Alison. It wouldn't suit Kat. It's about a matching process. It's a bit like finding your partner, as it were. You've got to find the yin to your yang, the thing that works best for you as an individual, because that's when you really will excel. And yes, I think important attributes for any dog is solid temperament, sound structure, confident disposition. I think that will help you live a great life with a dog if they're healthy, their body's healthy, their mind's healthy, and they've got a sound disposition. And then the other sexy stuff that like grip and all that stuff can be in addition to that baseline, those baseline characteristics. Certainly, I would look for, when from a breeding point of view, is a dog with a sound temperament, a dog with a good solid headspace, a clear head that doesn't fluster over things, isn't any extreme traits, and also has a sound body and decent structure. For me, I think the things to look for. How about yourself, Kat? Anything, because obviously you're in the pursuit of puppies.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and at the moment I'm quite mindful. Obviously I'm YGP and I'm learning a lot about it, and I'm very mindful that it's sort of half a test of training and it's half a test of genetics, because that's what the sport is. That's its foundation. So when I'm looking at puppies, I am definitely, and pedigrees, I'm definitely looking at a dog that is capable of domineering a helper in a field. That's what I want. I want a dog who is going to be confident enough to do that, and who is going to be strong on the field. I need that if I'm going to, do this sport, because that's what this sport is. And I want a dog who I'm going to live with, cuddle with, have for 15 years, and is going to have a great relationship with Gracie. So it's a balance, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's fine. It's coming back to finding the dog that's going to suit you as an individual and your lifestyle. How about yourself, Alison? You've obviously been involved with police dog picking, and obviously your own dogs. What characteristics would you look for in a dog?
Really the same as you, just a confident, outgoing dog that likes people. Obviously for the sport, genetics make a big difference. That having said, my next pup, it's not going to have IGP genetics, but I like a challenge. But yeah, and again, at the end of the day, it's the dog you can happily live with, because you've got that dog for the next 12 years. So yeah, it's genetics, but really just confident, outgoing people kind of dog, because they've got to have a solid temperament for IGP. These days, there's no room for bad temperaments, aggressive dogs, etc.
And I think for me, you know, I think that a solid temperament actually lends itself to things like good grip and calmness in the bite, because if the dog is affected by the environment or is apprehensive or is nervous or that's going to manifest itself in the way it does the biting entity of the sport. So for me, temperament and sound character are, and obviously physical, being able to have a dog that was where, certainly with Punch, I learned that the hard way. The physical entity was his undoing. His body just wasn't strong enough for the sport. So definitely for me, structure is a big thing, and soundness. But yeah, so one final point from, I'm just going to, before you draw things to a close, from Yvonne Walker. Lovely Yvonne. I wanted to participate in IGP years ago, but the trainer insisted I put a prong on my dobe. It's never going to happen, so I didn't pursue. However, years later, when I returned to a different club with my mascot Fluffiest, they were supportive of me using positive training, positive methods, and we had lots of fun. And obviously, she's had Mira and now Miso, which she's dabbled in. And I'd say definitely, if you find the right supportive people, I think that IGP is a fantastic sport. It is amazing to watch when, like all sports, when done well. I think it's a great thing for dog sports enthusiasts to unravel the Rubik's Cube that is creating that ultimate balance between drive and desire and control and accuracy. And for me, that is the thing that makes it such an exhilarating sport. So if you have enjoyed this conversation and want to learn from any of the people, obviously, Kat, quick shout out to how people can reach out with you.
Oh yeah, I'm the dog sport coach on Facebook and Instagram. There we go.
Excellent. And Corinne?
Facebook Messenger. I've got a page, Dog Training with Corinne Wrend.
Excellent. And Alison doesn't do training per se, but obviously she's heavily involved with Corinne and very, very approachable if you want to find out any more.
This is what I always say. If anybody's got any questions, just message me on Messenger, because we all need a helping hand. We all need somebody that, you know, can help us and advise us, and you should never be afraid to ask.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you very much, all three of you, for your time and your knowledge and your experience. Hopefully it inspires more people to find out a bit more about any Bitework sport and taking the path of reinforcement-based dog training. Let us know what you thought. If you feel you want to reach out to any of the ladies, I'm sure they'll be more than happy to give you some guidance. See you all later.
Bye.